The soft hum of the transport ship's engines faded as Lily stepped onto the gleaming floor of the Galactic Science Academy. Her silver-tinted skin caught the light from the massive crystal windows, and her large, almond-shaped eyes blinked rapidly to adjust to the brightness. She clutched her data pad close to her chest, a habit she'd developed whenever she felt nervous. The Academy was everything she had dreamed of, the center of scientific knowledge in the known galaxy. Floating platforms carried students and professors between the towering spires of transparent metal, while holographic displays showed the latest research findings from 100 different worlds. But something made her antenna twitch anxiously. Humans. She had heard they were allowed to work here now, and the thought made her uncomfortable. Back home, everyone knew about humans, the fierce beings from a death world who could survive almost anything and had a tendency toward violence. Her mother had warned her about them before she left. "Stay away from the humans," she had said. "They're unpredictable. Did you know they drink poison for enjoyment? And they eat plants that burn their mouths on purpose." Lost in her thoughts, Lily almost bumped into a cleaning drone. She stepped back quickly, bumping into something solid and warm. Turning around, she found herself face to face with exactly what she had hoped to avoid: a human. He was tall, with skin the color of the sand dunes back home. His maintenance uniform had the name Tom written on it, and he was carrying a box of tools that looked surprisingly basic compared to the advanced technology around them. "Careful there," he said with a gentle smile that confused her. Humans weren't supposed to be gentle. These drones can be a bit unpredictable when they're in cleaning mode. Lily stepped back, her antenna flattening against her head, a clear sign of distress among her people. The human noticed and gave her more space, which surprised her again. They weren't supposed to be so considerate. "Thank you," she managed to say, her universal translator converting her musical language into standard speech. She hurried away, feeling embarrassed by her reaction, but still uneasy. Throughout her first day, Lily couldn't help but notice the human, Tom, as he worked around the academy. He used actual physical tools instead of molecular reconstructors. He climbed maintenance ladders instead of using anti-gravity lifts. It all seemed so primitive, yet there was something fascinating about the way he solved problems. She watched from her laboratory as he helped a young crystalline student who had gotten their light processing array tangled in a data cable. Instead of calling for technical support, Tom simply pulled out a small cutting tool and carefully freed the student, all while telling a joke that made the crystal being's facets glow with amusement. Later, when the artificial gravity in one section flickered, Tom was there before anyone else, manually resetting systems and helping scared students keep their balance. He worked quickly, his movements sure and practiced, while sweating, actually losing water through his skin, a concept that both disgusted and intrigued Lily. During her lunch break in the Botanical Research Wing, Lily overheard two senior researchers discussing the human staff. "They're so physical," one said, their gas-based form swirling with disapproval. "Always touching things, fixing things with their hands. It's primitive, but effective," the other responded, surprising Lily. "Did you know that human maintained the life support systems during the last solar storm, when all our automated systems failed?" Lily found herself looking at her own hands. Her people were known for their grace and intelligence, not physical labor. Manual work was seen as beneath them. That's what automated systems and robots were for. Yet there was something about the way Tom worked that didn't seem primitive at all. It seemed practical. As she was preparing to leave for the day, the lights in her lab flickered. The environmental control panel showed some strange readings, but the automated diagnostic system showed everything was fine. She hesitated, then noticed Tom walking past her lab. For a moment, she considered calling him in to look at it. Then she remembered her mother's warnings and her own prejudices. The system said everything was fine, and surely the Academy's advanced technology knew better than a human's primitive instincts. Lily gathered her things and left, trying to ignore the uneasy feeling in her stomach. She didn't notice Tom stopping to frown at the environmental control panel outside her lab, or him making a note on his old-fashioned paper notebook. She was too busy thinking about how different humans were, never suspecting that those differences might soon prove to be more valuable than she could imagine. 3 weeks had passed since Lily's arrival at the academy, and strange things kept happening. The temperature in her lab would drop suddenly, then return to normal before the automated systems reported any problems. Her plants, specially bred specimens from 12 different worlds, showed signs of stress even though all readings appeared perfect. She was examining a wilting specimen when she heard familiar heavy footsteps in the hallway. Tom was making his daily rounds, checking systems with those simple tools of his. She had gotten used to seeing him around, though she still kept her distance. Today, however, something made her watch him more closely through the transparent wall of her lab. He stopped at the environmental control panel outside, just as he had every day for the past week. This time, he pulled out his paper notebook, such an odd primitive thing, and compared something in his notes, frowning. His expression made her antenna twitch nervously. One of the senior researchers, Professor Green in Starlight, floated past in his energy form. "Is there a problem?" the professor asked, his tone making it clear he didn't really think there could be. "These readings don't match up," Tom said, pointing to his notes. "The power usage is too high for the reported temperature, and there's a pattern to the fluctuations that doesn't make sense." The professor's energy form flickered in what Lily recognized as amusement. "The systems are self-monitoring and self-correcting. Perhaps your primitive measuring tools are confused by our advanced technology." Tom didn't seem offended by the professor's tone. He just shrugged and said, "Maybe. But where I come from, patterns usually mean something. And these patterns." He trailed off, looking troubled. Later that day, Lily noticed her favorite specimen, a color-changing vine from the crystal forests, had stopped responding to light changes. The automated system insisted the plant was healthy, but she could see it wasn't. For the first time, she wondered if she should trust her eyes over the computer's analysis. During lunch, she overheard Tom talking to another maintenance worker in the cafeteria. "The backup systems aren't cycling properly," he was saying, "and the power draws don't match the usage logs. Something's not right." "The computers say everything's fine," his coworker replied. "You worry too much. These systems are designed by the brightest minds in the galaxy. They don't just break down." "Systems always break down," Tom said quietly. "That's why we need to maintain them. And when they break down in patterns, it usually means someone's breaking them on purpose." Lily nearly dropped her nutrient cube. The idea that someone might be damaging the Academy systems on purpose had never occurred to her. Such behavior would be unthinkable among her people. But humans always thought about danger, didn't they? Always imagined the worst. That afternoon, she was recording data when her computer terminal flickered. For just a moment, she saw strings of code that shouldn't have been there. She blinked, and everything returned to normal. The automatic diagnostic reported all systems functioning perfectly. She thought about Tom's words about patterns, about trusting what you see over what you're told. Gathering her courage, she stepped out of her lab just as Tom was walking past. "Excuse me," she said, her antenna quivering slightly. Could you look at something in my lab?" Tom stopped, seeming surprised but pleased. "Of course," he said, giving her that gentle smile that still confused her. How could humans look so kind when everyone knew they were fierce? She showed him the wilting plants, explained about the temperature changes, and mentioned the strange code she'd seen. Tom listened carefully, asking simple but direct questions. He didn't dismiss her concerns or tell her to trust the computers. Instead, he pulled out his notebook and added her observations to his growing list of anomalies. "You were right to be worried," he said finally. "Something's definitely wrong here. The question is, why doesn't anyone want us to know about it?" Just then, all the lights in the lab went out. They came back on a second later, but Lily saw Tom's expression change. His features hardened, and for the first time, She saw a hint of the fierceness her people feared, but strangely, it didn't frighten her. Instead, she felt safer knowing that fierceness was on her side. "We need to show this to security," Tom said, his voice firm. "Something bad is coming, and we need to be ready." Lily nodded, realizing that maybe, just maybe, her people had been wrong about humans. Perhaps what they saw as primitive paranoia was actually valuable wisdom. She just hoped they would figure out what was wrong before it was too late. The security officer's 3 eyes blinked in sequence as he looked over Tom's notes. His tentacles moved across the holographic display, bringing up system logs that all showed normal readings. Lily stood next to Tom, trying to keep her antenna from flattening in frustration. "Everything appears to be functioning within acceptable parameters," the officer said. "Your primitive monitoring methods must be malfunctioning." Tom opened his mouth to argue, but a sudden alarm cut him off. Red lights flashed across the security station. The holographic displays flickered and died. "Emergency protocols engaged," announced the Academy's AI system. "Unknown contaminants detected in life support. Beginning lockdown procedures." Heavy security doors slammed down throughout the Academy. Lily could hear them closing in the distance, like thunder rolling through the halls. The security officer's skin changed from blue to pale gray, a sign of extreme distress in his species. "This is impossible," the officer said, tentacles flying over the dead holographic controls. The systems were just showing everything was fine. They were programmed to show that, Tom said, already pulling tools from his belt. "Someone's been hiding the real readings. We need to." The lights went out. Emergency lighting cast everything in a dim red glow. Lily felt the air getting thinner. The environmental systems were failing. "Warning," the AI announced, its voice distorting. "Life support systems compromised. Backup systems not responding. Estimated 17 minutes of breathable atmosphere remaining." Panic erupted in the halls. Students and professors of a dozen different species rushed in all directions. Some needed water to breathe, others specific gas mixtures. The Academy's sophisticated life support system usually accommodated them all. Now it was failing. "We need to get to the main environmental control room," Tom said, his voice steady despite the chaos. "That's where we can." A new alarm blared. Through the windows, Lily saw several ships detaching from the Academy's docking bays without authorization. "Alert! Unauthorized access detected in specimen storage. High-value research materials being removed." That's what this was about. Lily gasped, understanding finally hitting her. The rare specimens. "My research plants. They're stealing them." And using the life support failure as cover, Tom added grimly. He turned to the security officer. "Your security teams need to stop those ships. I'll handle the life support systems." The officer's tentacles twisted in doubt. "But you're just a maintenance worker. The systems are too complex for." "Those systems were built by people," Tom interrupted. "And anything built by people can be fixed by people. But we need to move now." The security officer hesitated, then nodded. He rushed off, already calling his teams on his communicator. "I'm going with you," Lily said to Tom, surprising herself with her determination. "It's dangerous," Tom warned. "The environmental controls." "I know the systems," she said. "I studied them. I may not know how to fix things like you do, but I understand how they're supposed to work." Tom smiled, that same gentle smile that had first confused her. "Then we'd better hurry." They ran through the corridors, passing scenes of increasing chaos. The sophisticated gravity controls were failing in some sections, causing students and equipment to float helplessly. Other areas were becoming too hot or too cold as the environmental systems went haywire. They'd reached the entrance to her lab section, but the security doors were sealed. The air was getting noticeably thinner. "The manual override isn't working," Lily said, trying to activate the door controls. Her hands were shaking. "The whole system is locked down." Tom examined the door for a moment, then pulled out his simple mechanical tools. Sometimes the old ways are better, he said, starting to work on the door's mechanism. Technology can be hacked. Override codes can be changed. But you can't hack physics. The door creaked open just enough for them to squeeze through. But what they saw inside made them freeze. Lily's lab, with all her carefully cultivated specimens, was being ransacked by two figures in environmental suits, and behind them, through the transparent walls, she could see more thieves in the other labs, taking everything of value. "We can't let them take those specimens," Lily whispered. "Some of them are the last of their kind." "We won't," Tom said, and Lily saw that fierceness again in his eyes. But now she understood it wasn't something to fear. It was something to be thankful for. Because sometimes, when everything else fails, you need someone willing to fight. The air continued to thin, and warning lights flashed all around them. They had minutes at most before the atmosphere became unbreathable. And somewhere in the academy, thousands of beings from hundreds of worlds were counting on them, whether they knew it or not. Tom moved faster than Lily thought possible for a human. Before the thieves could react, he had grabbed a length of pipe from his tool belt and thrown it with perfect accuracy. It hit the emergency release for the specimen containment units, causing protective shields to slam down around the most valuable plants. The thieves spun around, raising weapons that crackled with energy. Lily's antenna flattened in fear, but Tom was already moving. He rolled behind a lab bench as energy bolts scorched the wall behind him. "The manual ventilation controls," he shouted to Lily. "Can you reach them?" Lily looked where he was pointing. A simple mechanical panel was hidden behind the main computer terminal. Her people would never think to use it. It was too primitive. But right now, primitive might save their lives. She stayed low and moved along the wall while Tom kept the thieves distracted. He was using his tools as projectiles, forcing them to take cover. Their environmental suits made them clumsy, while Tom moved with surprising grace for someone so sturdy. Lily reached the panel and pulled it open. Inside were simple mechanical controls, levers and valves that could bypass the main computer system. She understood the theory but had never actually used anything like this. "Pull the red lever and turn the valve 2 full turns right," Tom called out, dodging another energy bolt. The air was getting dangerously thin now. Lily could see other beings in nearby labs starting to collapse. Her hands shaking, she did as Tom instructed. There was a loud hiss, and emergency oxygen began flowing into the lab. It wasn't the perfectly balanced atmosphere they usually had, but it was breathable. Now the blue valve, quarter turn left. Tom was working his way closer to the thieves, using lab equipment as cover. One of them tried to reach the specimen containers, but Tom threw a wrench that hit them squarely in the hand, making them drop their weapon. Lily turned the valve, and the temperature stabilization system kicked in. Not the complex computer-controlled version, but an older mechanical backup that Tom had somehow known about. "You primitive fool," one of the thieves snarled at Tom. "You have no idea what these specimens are worth. We're taking them, and you can't." They never finished the sentence. Tom had gotten close enough to grab their environmental suit's arrows. With a quick twist, he disconnected it. The thief panicked, giving Tom the chance to knock them down with a move Lily had never seen before. The second thief tried to run, but Tom had been slowly herding them away from the door. They slipped on some spilled nutrient solution and fell hard. Their weapons skittered across the floor to Lily's feet. She picked it up, surprised at how natural it felt to point it at the fallen thief. She had never held a weapon before, but right now, protecting her specimens, protecting her work, felt more important than her cultural distaste for violence. Tom quickly tied up both thieves using cable ties from his tool belt. He was breathing hard but seemed barely fazed by the fight. Lily realized that what her people saw as brutish strength was actually carefully controlled power. Every move he had made was designed to stop the thieves while causing minimal harm. "The others," Lily said, remembering the thieves they had seen in the other labs. "We need tow." "Already handled," Tom grinned, holding up a small device he had taken from one of the thieves. "This controls their environmental suits. They're all locked down now. The security teams can pick them up once we get the main systems back online." Lily stared at him in amazement. "You planned that? All of it?" "Humans are good at improvising," he said with a shrug. "And we noticed things, like how their suits all matched, meaning one control system, or how they were too confident, meaning they thought they had total control of the situation. I always thought humans were—" Lily paused, embarrassed. "Primitive, violent," Tom suggested, not unkindly. "Maybe we are, a bit, but sometimes you need someone who knows how to fight, someone who understands that technology can fail, and who knows what to do when it does." The emergency lights were still flashing, and they could hear chaos in other parts of the academy. But now Lily understood something her people had missed about humans. They weren't primitive. They were practical. They weren't violent. They were protective. And right now, that was exactly what they needed. Alarms still blared throughout the academy as Lily and Tom raced toward the main environmental control center. The manual overrides in her lab section had helped, but the rest of the academy was still in danger. They passed several collapsed beings along the way, and Tom stopped to help each one into areas where the backup oxygen was flowing. "We're losing time," Lily said, though she admired how he refused to leave anyone behind. "Time doesn't matter if people die," Tom replied, helping a crystalline being whose light was dimming. "Get to the control center. I'll catch up." Lily hesitated. Before today, she would never have trusted a human to handle such delicate work alone. Now she wasn't sure she trusted herself without one, but she nodded and ran ahead. The control center doors were sealed, but she remembered what Tom had shown her about manual overrides. Her fingers found the hidden panel, and she smiled as the door creaked open. Her people had always thought themselves above physical work, but there was something satisfying about solving problems with your own hands. Inside, the main control room was dark except for flashing emergency lights. The advanced holographic controls were dead, but Lily could see the old mechanical backup panels that Tom had mentioned. They were covered in dust. Clearly no one had thought they'd ever be needed. She heard footsteps behind her and turned, expecting Tom. Instead, she saw 3 more figures in environmental suits. They had disabled the main systems, she realized. They had been waiting here. "Step away from the controls," one of them ordered, raising a weapon. "Our buyers don't care about the specimens only. They want the Academy's research data too. Once everyone evacuates in panic, we'll take everything." Lily's antenna quivered, but she stood her ground. She thought of Tom, of how humans faced danger to protect others. Her voice shook, but her words were firm. "You'll kill thousands of beings. They'll evacuate before the air runs out," another thief said. "Probably. Now, move away from—" Something crashed through the ventilation duct above them. Tom landed in the middle of the group, sending them stumbling. He had soot and dust on his face. He must have crawled through the maintenance shafts to get here faster. "Lily, the controls," he shouted, grappling with the nearest thief. "Pattern 731. Like in your lab." She turned to the controls, understanding what he meant. The same override sequence that had worked in her lab could work here, just on a bigger scale. Her hands flew over the switches and valves while Tom kept the thieves busy. A weapon fired. Lily heard Tom grunt in pain, but he didn't stop fighting. She forced herself not to look, focusing on the controls. Tom had trusted her with this task. She wouldn't let him down. One of the thieves broke away from the fight and rushed at her. Without thinking, Lily grabbed a wrench from Tom's fallen tool belt and swung it the way she had seen Tom do. The thief stumbled back, surprised that a member of her peaceful species would fight back. The main valve was stuck. Lily put all her strength into it, her silver skin straining with effort. She heard Tom shout in triumph as he subdued another thief. The valve finally turned with a screech of protest. Fresh air hissed into the ventilation system. Backup power hummed to life. Around them, the Academy's systems began to restart. Not the complex computer-controlled versions, but the simple mechanical backups that couldn't be hacked or sabotaged. Secondary life support engaged, announced a simple electronic voice, not the AI, but an older system. Atmosphere stabilizing. The last thief tried to run, but Tom was there to stop them. Despite the energy weapon burn on his arm, he moved with the same controlled power as before. The thief went down hard. Lily rushed to Tom's side. "You're hurt." "Just a scratch," he said, though she could see it was more serious. "Nice work with that wrench, by the way. And the controls." "I had a good teacher," she said, "though my people would be shocked to see me doing physical work. Or fighting." "Sometimes the most peaceful people make the best fighters," Tom said, using some of his ever-present cable ties to secure the thieves. "Because they only fight when it really matters." Through the control room windows, they could see lights coming back on throughout the academy. The emergency would soon be over. But Lily knew that something had changed forever, not just in the academy, but in her understanding of humans and of herself. Security teams swarmed the control room, their lights piercing the dim emergency lighting. The security chief's tentacles moved in agitation as he surveyed the scene. 3 more criminals tied up, Tom's injured arm, and Lily standing proudly next to her human friend with a wrench still in her hand. "The other teams report all intruders captured," the chief said. "Their ships were disabled before they could escape. But we still don't understand how they managed to override our systems so completely." "I think I know," Lily said. She moved to one of the computer terminals and began typing. Her fingers moved with newfound confidence. She had learned more about taking action in the past hour than in all her years of academic study. "Look at this." The screen showed lines of code that had been hidden beneath the normal operating system. Tom leaned in, his practical knowledge helping him spot patterns even in the advanced programming. "They installed their override programs during routine maintenance," he said. "That's why the systems kept reporting everything was normal. They weren't malfunctioning. They were lying." "Impossible," one of the senior professors said, floating into the room in his energy form. "Our systems are too sophisticated to be fooled by such primitive methods." "That's exactly why it worked," Lily replied, surprising herself with her boldness in correcting a senior professor. "We were so confident in our advanced technology that we forgot the basics. We forgot that sometimes simpler is safer." Tom nodded, wincing slightly as a medical technician treated his injured arm. "Your systems are amazing, but they're still built on basic principles. Principles that anyone can understand if they're willing to learn." The professor's energy form flickered in what might have been embarrassment. Around them, maintenance crews were working to restore full power to the academy. Many were using manual tools now, following Tom's example. The specimens, Lily suddenly remembered. In all the other labs, are they safe? "All secure," the security chief assured her, "thanks to your quick action with the containment shields. Though I'm curious how a botanist knew how to operate manual overrides and defend against armed intruders." Lily's antenna tilted toward Tom, who gave her that now familiar gentle smile. "I had help," she said, "from someone who taught me that being civilized doesn't mean forgetting how to be strong." The medical technician finished with Tom's arm and moved away. The burn would heal, leaving only a small scar. Lily found herself thinking that scars on humans weren't ugly. They were marks of courage, showing where they had faced danger to protect others. "The Academy Board will want to speak with both of you," the security chief said. "This incident has exposed serious flaws in our security protocols. We need to rethink our entire approach." "Perhaps," the professor said slowly, their energy form shifting to a more respectful configuration, "we could benefit from combining our advanced technology with some more traditional methods." Tom stood up, testing his injured arm. "The best security comes from being willing to learn from everyone," he said, "no matter where they're from or what people think about their methods." The security teams began leading the captured thieves away. The criminals had thought the Academy's sophisticated beings would be helpless without their technology. They hadn't counted on a human's practical courage or an alien botanist willing to learn new ways of thinking. Lily looked around the control room. The advanced holographic displays were coming back online, but now she could see the simple mechanical controls beneath them. They weren't primitive, she realized. They were foundation. Like humans themselves, they were the strong core that supported all the shining advancement built on top. "Thank you," she said to Tom, "for teaching me that being fierce isn't the same as being violent, that being advanced doesn't always mean being right." "And thank you," Tom replied, "for being willing to learn. Not everyone is brave enough to question what they've always believed." Through the windows, they could see the academy coming back to life. Students and professors were emerging from where they had taken shelter, looking around with new appreciation for the basic systems that had saved them. Something had changed today, and not just in the academy's security protocols. Sometimes, Lily thought, it takes a crisis to show you the truth, and the truth was that humans weren't fierce because they were primitive. They were fierce because they cared enough to protect what mattered, even if it meant risking themselves. That wasn't primitive at all. It was the most advanced thing she had ever seen. 2 months after the attack, the academy looked different, not just because of the new security measures, but because of how people worked together. In Lily's lab section, she watched as a young crystalline student helped a human maintenance worker understand the complex light patterns that kept their specimens healthy. Next door, a human engineer was teaching a gaseous professor how to operate manual overrides. Lily smiled, her antennae swaying gently as she recorded observations about her plants. The specimens had recovered well from the crisis. Some had even grown stronger, adapting to the brief exposure to different conditions, much like she had adapted to new ways of thinking. "Still using paper backup records?" Tom asked, entering her lab with his tool belt jingling. The energy weapon burn on his arm had healed into a pale scar, barely visible now. "Someone taught me not to trust computers completely," she replied. She no longer felt nervous around humans. In fact, she had become one of the Academy's strongest advocates for including more human perspectives in their work. The board meeting went well, Tom said, checking the newly installed manual controls near her workstation. "They've approved the new training program. Starting next term, all students will learn basic maintenance and emergency procedures." "I heard some people complained," Lily said, carefully pruning a color-changing vine. "They said it wasn't proper for advanced beings to do physical work." Tom grinned. Those same people were pretty happy to know how to work manual air valves during the crisis. A soft chime sounded, and a holographic message appeared in the center of the lab. It was from the Academy's security chief, announcing that the last of the specimen thieves network had been caught. They had found them using a combination of advanced tracking technology and, as the message noted with a hint of pride, traditional human investigative methods. "Your mother sent another message," Tom mentioned, watching Lily check the mechanical backup systems, a habit she had developed since the attack. "She's still worried about you working with humans." Lily laughed, a musical sound that made her antenna quiver. "I sent her pictures of the award ceremony, the one where they gave you a medal for saving the Academy. I told her that humans being fierce isn't a bad thing. It's what makes them such good protectors." She touched the small wrench she now kept on her desk, the same one she had used during the crisis. It reminded her that being civilized didn't mean being helpless, and being advanced didn't mean forgetting the basics. 3 more human maintenance workers start next week," Tom said, making some adjustments to the environmental controls. The Academy finally realized that depending too much on automation was risky. "We need people who can think and adapt when things go wrong. And more students are signing up for the practical skills classes than ever before," Lily added. She had volunteered to help teach some of them, sharing what she had learned about combining advanced knowledge with basic skills. Through the lab's transparent walls, they could see the Academy's central garden. It had been redesigned after the crisis, now featuring both sophisticated atmospheric generators and simple mechanical vents. Like everything else in the Academy these days, It was a blend of the advanced and the practical. "You know," Lily said, checking the manual locks on her specimen containers. "Another new habit. I used to think humans were dangerous because they were fierce. Now I understand that being fierce isn't the same as being violent. It's about being strong enough to protect what matters." Tom nodded, his gentle smile showing as he finished his maintenance check. "And I used to think advanced aliens were too removed from practical reality. Now I know that being advanced doesn't mean you can't learn new, or old, ways of doing things." A group of students passed by the lab, a mix of different species including 2 humans. They were all carrying both electronic tablets and physical tools, talking excitedly about their latest projects. The boundaries between maintenance workers and researchers, between physical and intellectual work, had started to blur. Lily looked at her thriving specimens, at the mix of high-tech and basic tools on her workbench, and at her human friend who had changed how she saw the universe. The Academy had always prided itself on advancing knowledge, but now it understood that true wisdom meant embracing all kinds of strength. Her antennae swayed gently as she smiled. Sometimes the fiercest beings could be the gentlest protectors, and the most advanced civilizations could learn from the simplest tools. In the end, that was what made the galaxy truly wonderful, not just the differences between species, but how those differences could make them all stronger together.